The hum was the first thing you noticed. Not a noise, but a presence. A low, resonant frequency that vibrated deep in your bones, a constant reminder of the immense power coiled silently within the glass walls of Ethelred Labs. It was the sound of the future being forged, a future that was, at this precise moment, spectacularly failing. Kaelen Reed, founder and chief architect of this future, stood before a wall of holographic data, his reflection a sharp, tailored silhouette against the cascade of impossible numbers. The data was beautiful, elegant, and utterly wrong. For 6 weeks, Prometheus, his quantum artificial intelligence, had been malfunctioning. It wasn't crashing or producing errors. Instead, it was generating what his lead diagnostic engineer, a brilliant young woman named Anya, had poetically termed perfect ghosts. Intricate, flawless data structures that were mathematically sound, internally consistent, and completely devoid of purpose. They were elegant solutions to questions no one had asked, phantom symphonies played in an empty hall. Billions in funding, a decade of his life, and the collective intellect of the brightest minds of his generation were being poured into a machine that had become an artist of the absurd. The air in the quantum core chamber was thick with the scent of ozone and stale coffee. Kaelen's team, a collection of prodigies hand-picked from the world's top institutions, were pale and frayed, their usual confident energy replaced by a brittle, anxious exhaustion. They spoke in hushed, urgent tones, their language a dense tapestry of quantum mechanics and computational theory that would be indecipherable to the outside world. To the old man who was currently wiping a smudge from the chamber's exterior glass, it was just noise. Elias Vance moved with a slow, deliberate economy of motion that spoke of long practice. His cart, with its squeaking wheel he'd been meaning to fix for months, was a relic of the analog world, a stark contrast to the seamless, glowing technology that surrounded him. He was a ghost of a different sort, a fixture of the night shift, visible only in the periphery. He cleaned the spaces where genius wrestled with the impossible, wiping away the fingerprints and coffee rings left by people who never saw his face. He knew their habits, the way Kaelen Reed paced in a tight, aggressive circle, the way Anya chewed on the end of her stylus when she was deep in thought. He saw the tension in their shoulders, the growing despair in their eyes. He'd seen that look before, decades ago, in the faces of his own colleagues, and in his own reflection. Tonight, the energy was different. It was a razor's edge between breakthrough and collapse. Through the glass, he saw a whiteboard covered in a frantic scrawl of equations. Most of it was a foreign language to him, a new dialect of physics born long after his own lexicon had been rendered obsolete. But one small string of symbols, tucked away in a corner, snagged his attention. It wasn't part of the main problem they were trying to solve. It looked like a stray thought, a piece of academic graffiti. A resonance cascade function. It was archaic, almost an alchemical symbol in this temple of quantum purity. Elias paused, his cleaning cloth hovering over the glass. His mind, a place that was usually a quiet repository of faded memories and custodial routines, felt a sudden, unfamiliar tremor. He saw a different room, one filled with chalk dust instead of holographic light. He smelled old paper and heard the excited murmur of a lecture hall. The equation on that board was a ghost from his own past, a key to a door he had locked and sealed 40 years ago. He felt a cold dread mix with a spark of something he hadn't felt in a lifetime, curiosity. He didn't know what their machine did, not really. He just knew that the problem they were fighting, the frantic energy, the long nights, it all felt like an echo of a battle he had once fought, and decisively lost. He watched as Kaelen slammed his hand flat against the glass, right where Elias's hand was on the other side, making the old man flinch. Kaelen wasn't looking at him, but through him, at the useless, beautiful data shimmering in the air. "It's mocking us," Kaelen hissed to no one in particular. "It's building cathedrals of logic with no God inside." Elias pulled his hand back, the cold of the glass clinging to his skin. He looked again at the stray equation on the whiteboard, then at the perfect ghosts swirling on the holographic displays. They were not mocking. They were singing a song he had written, a song he thought the world had long forgotten. He resumed his work, the squeak of his cart's wheel a frail, mechanical sound against the deep, powerful hum of the machine. The janitor, the relic, the ghost of Ethelred Labs, had just recognized the phantom in the machine, because he was the one who had drawn the map to its dimension, a lifetime ago. The future was failing because it had forgotten its own past, a past that was now quietly, methodically, buffing the floors. The night bled into the pre-dawn hours, a bruised purple sky visible through the towering atrium windows. The quantum core chamber was empty now, save for Kaelen. He had sent his team home with a forced calm he didn't feel, telling them to get some sleep, to come back with fresh eyes. But he couldn't leave. Leaving felt like surrender. He was a prisoner in the cathedral he had built, tormented by the silent, incomprehensible prayers of his own creation. He cycled through the data again, the phantom structures blooming and collapsing on the displays. They were perfect fractals of logic, intricate as snowflakes, but they led nowhere. They were the answer, he was sure of it, but he had forgotten the question. His mind kept snagging on Anya's term, perfect ghosts. It was too apartment. The machine wasn't broken, it felt haunted. Haunted by a logic that was flawless but alien, a set of rules that ran parallel to their own, never intersecting. He slumped into his chair, the leather sighing under his weight. He had staked everything on Prometheus. His reputation, his investors' fortunes, his own deeply held belief that any problem could be solved with enough processing power and human will. For the first time in his life, he was facing an enemy he couldn't outthink, because it wasn't an enemy. It was a mirror reflecting a side of reality he didn't know existed. The squeak of Elias's cart pulled him from his reverie. The old janitor had entered the chamber, his presence so unobtrusive it was almost a part of the ambient noise. Kaelen watched him, not with annoyance, but with a strange, detached curiosity. The man's routine was a constant in this world of frantic variables. The meticulous way he emptied the waste bins, the circular motion he used to wipe down the consoles, the care with which he coiled the cord on the floor buffer. It was a simple, physical algorithm, perfectly executed night after night. A stark contrast to the beautiful, useless chaos of his quantum algorithm. Elias moved through the room, his gaze carefully averted from Kaelen, as was his habit. He was a servant to the space, not to the people in it. But tonight, he felt Kaelen's stare, a focused intensity that was different from the usual dismissive glances. He kept his head down, his hands performing the familiar tasks that had been his shield for 3 decades. But his mind was far away, adrift in the chalk-dusted halls of the 1980s. He remembered the day his theory was shattered. Dr. Elias Vance, the prodigy of theoretical physics, presenting his work on resonance cascade theory to a panel of his peers. He had proposed that in sufficiently complex systems, information didn't just travel, it resonated. It created harmonic echoes that were not mere copies, but alternate, phantom states of existence. His colleagues had called it metaphysical nonsense, a mathematician's ghost story. They had demanded physical proof, but the technology to even test his equations wouldn't exist for 50 years. His career had crumbled, not in a fiery explosion, but in a slow, suffocating wave of quiet ridicule. He retreated, trading the complexities of the universe for the simplicity of a mop and bucket. He had chosen anonymity over the slow burn of professional disgrace. Now, that same ghost story was being written in quantum light on a billion-dollar machine. As Elias reached for the trash can beside Kaelen's desk, he saw the main data stream up close. It wasn't chaos. It was a symphony. A frantic, discordant symphony, yes, but it had a structure, a repeating theme hidden beneath the noise. He recognized the cadence. He recognized the key. He paused for a fraction of a second too long, his hand hovering over the bin. "Can you skip this room tonight?" Kaelen said, his voice flat with exhaustion. "I need to think." Elias nodded, pulling his hand back. He turned to leave, the squeak of his cart marking his retreat. But at the doorway, he stopped. He didn't turn around. He just spoke, his voice a low, gravelly thing, unused to speaking in this room of sharp, confident voices. The echoes are louder than the voices. He said it to the door, to the hallway, to himself. Then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of cleaning solution and a profound silence in his wake. Kaelen sat motionless. The janitor's words hung in the air, nonsensical, meaningless. The ramblings of an old man. He dismissed it, turning back to the screen. But the phrase wouldn't leave him. The echoes are louder than the voices. He pulled up a raw data visualization, a swirling cloud of quantum states. The primary calculations, the voices, were there, fighting for coherence. But behind them, around them, were the ghosts. The harmonic patterns, the phantom structures. The echoes. They were more complex, more dominant, more loud. It was a foolish, poetic metaphor, but it shifted something in his perspective. He stopped trying to fix the voices and, for the first time, he truly looked at the echoes. He wasn't looking at an error anymore. He was looking at a message, written in a language he couldn't understand. A ghost story, just like the old physicists had called it. The janitor's words became a splinter in Kaelen's mind. For 2 days, he abandoned the direct assault on Prometheus, instead focusing on the enigmatic phrase. The echoes are louder than the voices. It felt less like a piece of data and more like a Zen koan, a riddle designed to break the logical mind. He delegated the day-to-day diagnostics to Anya, telling her to catalog the echoes, to treat them not as errors but as a deliberate output. Then, he locked himself in his office and began a different kind of search. He dove into the digital archives of academic history, a realm he rarely explored. He was a man of the future, the past was, to him, a graveyard of obsolete ideas. He searched for terms like information resonance, harmonic data states, phantom structures. The initial results were a wasteland of fringe science and crackpot theories. But as he refined his search, pushing back through the decades, a name began to surface, Dr. Elias Vance. It appeared in a handful of papers from the late 1980s, all centered around a discredited field called resonance cascade theory. The abstracts were dense, almost impenetrable, filled with a mathematics that felt both elegant and strangely archaic. The core idea was radical. Vance had proposed that information in a closed system didn't just exist, it created tiered, harmonic reflections of itself, echoes that contained a different kind of truth. Kaelen felt a prickle of intellectual electricity. The theory had been torn apart in peer reviews. Lacks empirical evidence. More philosophy than physics. Unfalsifiable. Vance had published a final, defiant paper and then, professionally, he had simply ceased to exist. Kaelen found a low-resolution photo of the man from a university newsletter, a confident, intense academic with dark hair and a piercing gaze. There was no resemblance to the stooped, quiet janitor. It was impossible. A coincidence of names. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling. Meanwhile, Elias was wrestling with his own ghosts. After his shift, he didn't go back to his small, neat apartment. Instead, he took the bus to the city's central library, a grand old building of marble and silence. He hadn't been there in years. He navigated the hushed corridors to the science archives in the basement, a place that smelled of decaying paper and forgotten knowledge. He found what he was looking for in a row of bound journals, the Journal of Theoretical Physics, 1988. His hands, calloused from years of manual labor, trembled slightly as he opened the heavy volume. And there it was. His work. His name. Resonance Cascades, a Theory of Harmonic Information States by Dr. Elias Vance. Reading his own words was like meeting a younger, more brilliant version of himself. A man he had tried to forget. He saw the fire in the arguments, the desperate certainty. He also saw the flaws, the leaps of faith that his colleagues had rightfully savaged. He hadn't been entirely right. But as he sat there, the hum of the library's fluorescent lights replacing the hum of the quantum core, he began to see the connection. He thought about the machine at the lab, its immense, near-infinite complexity. His theory had failed because it required a system so complex that the echoes would be stable enough to observe. A system that couldn't have been imagined in 1988. A system like Prometheus. He realized with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that Kaelen Reed hadn't just built a supercomputer. He had inadvertently built the perfect laboratory for proving Elias Vance's life's work. The perfect ghosts weren't a malfunction, they were the theory made manifest. The machine was working perfectly, just on a level of reality its creators hadn't accounted for. A profound sadness settled over him. His vindication was trapped inside a machine he couldn't access, understood by no one, least of all himself until now. What could he do? March into the office of a tech billionaire and announce that the janitor had solved their quantum conundrum with a 40-year-old discredited theory? They would think he was insane. His dignity, the quiet, fragile thing he had cultivated for 30 years, would be shattered. But the problem gnawed at him. It was a puzzle, and he was, at his core, a problem solver. It was a professional courtesy, an intellectual imperative. The next night, he went about his duties with a new, secret purpose. He waited until the witching hour, when the labs were at their quietest. He found Kaelen's office empty, the man himself likely still sealed in the core chamber. Elias took a pen from his pocket, a simple ballpoint. On a clean, crisp napkin from the break room dispenser, he wrote a single line of mathematics. It wasn't a solution. It was the heart of the problem, the foundational equation from his 1988 paper. The one that governed the creation of the very first echo. He walked into Kaelen's pristine office, the scent of leather and success thick in the air. He placed the napkin squarely in the center of the vast, empty desk. It was a message in a bottle, cast across an ocean of time and status. It was an act of intellectual desperation, a quiet, hopeless gambit. He expected nothing. It would be thrown away with the coffee cups and sandwich wrappers. But he had to do it. For the brilliant young man he once was, and for the beautiful, misunderstood machine humming away in the heart of the building. Kaelen returned to his office as the first hints of dawn threatened the long night. His search through the academic archives had left him feeling more adrift than ever. The theories of Elias Vance were a fascinating dead end, an intellectual ghost story from a bygone era. He entered his office, ready to finally admit defeat and call his investors to report the catastrophic failure of their flagship project. And then he saw it. A napkin, sitting on the polished obsidian of his desk. His first reaction was a flare of irritation at the cleaning staff's carelessness. He reached out to sweep it into the bin, but the ink on its surface caught his eye. It wasn't a phone number or a doodle. It was an equation. Kaelen froze. The notation was unlike the sharp, efficient characters his programmers used. It was old school, written with a confident, looping hand that spoke of chalkboards, not touchscreens. But the mathematics was terrifyingly elegant. He recognized the structure immediately from the old papers he'd been reading. It was a resonance integral, the core of Vance's discredited theory. To anyone else, it would be meaningless. To Kaelen, after 2 days immersed in that forgotten world, it was like a key turning in a lock he hadn't known existed. He snatched the napkin, his heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and a wild, surging hope. This couldn't be a coincidence. He ran from his office, the napkin clutched in his hand, and stormed into the quantum core. Anya was still there, asleep in a chair, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the swirling data. "Anya, wake up," he said, his voice sharp with an urgency that cut through her exhaustion. He smoothed the napkin on a console. "Run a simulation. I want you to integrate this function into the primary diagnostic matrix. Don't use it as a solution, use it as a baseline filter. I want to see how the ghost data organizes itself around this principle." Anya stared at the equation, then at Kaelen's feverish expression. "Kaelen, what is this? It looks like something out of a textbook from the last century." "Just do it," he commanded. As Anya's fingers flew across the holographic interface, Kaelen raced back to his office and pulled up the building's security feed. He scrubbed back through the night's footage. And there it was. 3:47 a.m. The janitor, Elias, entering his office. He moved with his usual slow pace, but his actions were deliberate. He didn't just empty the trash. He walked to the desk, placed the small white square upon it, and left. Kaelen leaned back, a slow breath escaping his lips. It was him. The quiet old man who haunted the halls was the same man from the grainy university photo, the ghost from the archives. The name wasn't a coincidence. It was a secret. He ran a search, a real one this time, using the full power of his company's resources. Dr. Elias Vance. The digital ghost took shape. MIT, PhD in theoretical physics. A dazzling early career. Then, after the 1988 conference, the trail went cold. No publications. No academic positions. A few years later, a social security number pops up for a custodial position at a downtown office building. Then another. And for the last 15 years, here. At Ethelred Labs. His entire brilliant, disgraced past had been hidden beneath a janitor's uniform. A call came through from Anya. Her voice was trembling. Kaelen, you need to see this. He was back in the core in seconds. On the main display, the chaotic symphony of ghost data had been silenced. The data was still there, but it was no longer random. It had snapped into a stunningly intricate, perfectly ordered lattice. The single equation on the napkin had acted like a tuning fork, and the entirety of the machine's phantom output had resonated with it, revealing its hidden structure. It's not an error, Anya whispered, her eyes wide with awe. It's a language. Kaelen looked at the now perfect patterns, then at the napkin still resting on the console. The old man hadn't just given him the answer. He had given him the entire dictionary. The humility of the gesture was staggering. The man who held the key to a multi-billion-dollar problem had delivered it on a piece of tissue paper, a quiet offering in the dead of night. Kaelen felt a profound sense of shame. He thought of the countless times he had looked past the janitor, the casual dismissals, the utter invisibility of the man. He had a genius in his building, a founding father of a lost field of physics, and he had been letting him empty his trash. He knew what he had to do. He didn't call security. He didn't call HR. He simply waited. That night, Kaelen sat in the dark of his office, the lights off, the door ajar. He waited for hours, watching the clock. Finally, he heard it. The faint, rhythmic squeak of the cart coming down the hallway. The sound that had been background noise for years now sounded like an overture. Elias entered the office, his movements as practiced and silent as ever. He likely didn't even notice the figure sitting in the shadows until he was halfway across the room. Kaelen switched on a single desk lamp, its warm light illuminating the space between them. On the desk, placed side by side, were the napkin and a printed copy of the 1988 paper, Resonance Cascades, with Elias's name on it. Elias froze, his hand still on his cart. His carefully constructed world of anonymity had just been breached. His face, a mask of quiet composure for 30 years, showed a flicker of profound vulnerability. He looked like a man who was about to run. Dr. Vance. Kaelen's voice was quiet, stripped of its usual authority, filled with a respect he hadn't felt in years. I believe we have something to discuss.